All right, so we got some pretty big updates coming out of the January 6th committee hearings because it appears like the Department of Justice under Merrick Garland is going to be moving forward with a criminal probe into none other than Donald Trump himself. So, here from Jake Johnson of Common Dreams, he says this is big news. The DOJ is investigating Trump in a criminal probe of January 6th attacks. So, a little bit of details here. They say the U.S. Department of Justice is directly investigating Donald Trump's actions as part of a criminal probe into the January 6th attack on the Capitol. News welcomed by lawmakers and watchdogs who have accused the DOJ of dragging its feet despite having a strong case for prosecuting the former president. And I think that's absolutely true. Merrick Garland has been pretty pathetic on a number of different fronts, but even just in going after Donald Trump and his various high-ranking top administration officials and lackeys, they definitely have been holding back. And I think as we get into more details in terms of what the actual crimes that he could be charged with are, it seems pretty cut and dry. And if anything, Merrick Garland could have been pushing for this a lot sooner than he has, but they continue here saying the Washington Post reported late Tuesday that, quote, prosecutors who are questioning witnesses before a grand jury, including two top aides to Vice President Mike Pence, have asked in recent days about conversations with Trump, his lawyers, and others in his inner circle who sought to substitute Trump allies for certified electors from some of the states that Joe Biden won. And they say the prosecutors have asked hours of detailed questions about meetings that Trump led in December of 2020 and January 2021, his pressure campaign on Pence to overturn the election, and what instructions Trump gave his lawyers and advisors about fake electors and sending electors back to the states. Now, this statement here, fake electors, is something that we're going to get to here in a second, but something that even people within Trump's inner circle were saying, okay? They knew that these were fake electors. They knew that it was bullshit. They knew they had no basis in reality, and they still moved forward with it. So, again, seems pretty cut and dry there, but they say they're also sending the electors back to the states, and the Post continued, citing unnamed people familiar with the matter. Some of the questions focused directly on the extent of Trump's involvement in the fake elector effort, led by his outside lawyers, including John Eastman and Rudy Giuliani. And the Post also reported that the Justice Department has seized the phone of Trump's chief of staff, Mark Meadows, so that also could be pretty big, if assuming that you get access to some information, some, I don't know, maybe text messages surrounding the days leading up to January 6th, because, again, this isn't something that was like, they didn't know that this was going to happen. Trump knew that people were going to the Capitol. He literally called on them to march to the Capitol after saying, Rudy Giuliani coming out and saying, you got to fight like hell, you got to treat this like it's your last stand. They knew that people in the crowd were armed. They knew exactly what the fuck they were doing. We now know, thanks to the January 6th committee hearings, that Trump was basically cheering behind the scenes, that his supporters outside at the Capitol were saying to hang Mike Pence. Again, we know that they knew that these fake electors were in fact faked. So, I mean, top to bottom, I don't really know how you wouldn't have a solid case here. I don't really know how you'd be able to work your way around this, but nonetheless, we do have a system here in the United States that is almost unanimously, averse to going after some of the most powerful people and institutions in the country. So, wouldn't be surprised if Donald Trump manages to wriggle his way out of this one. Like the classic meme. I mean, how is Donnie going to figure his way or wiggle his way out of this one? And then he inevitably does. This could definitely be another instance of that, but they continue here saying, prior to the House January 6 committee hearings, which offered new evidence of Trump's central role in the Capitol attack and made the case that the mob assault was part of a coordinated coup attempt, the Justice Department has restricted internal discussions of the former president's responsibility, according to the New York Times. And that approach drew increasingly vocal frustration from legal experts and members of Congress who argued that failure to hold Trump accountable would embolden the far right in its campaign to seize the levers of power nationwide. And I think that's 100% true. Again, obviously it's going to be contentious. You're going after a former president, somebody who wants to run in 2024. It's going to be a difficult thing. He's going to be throwing a fucking tantrum. But regardless, if you don't want to set the standard that that type of thing is acceptable, sicking a mob onto the Capitol building in an effort to undo or prevent the certification of a valid election, you can't just let that shit slide, right? You have to go after a lot of these high-ranking people up until, Donald Trump himself. But they finish off here with an interview from Merrick Garland doing an interview with NBC. And they say, in this interview that aired hours ahead of the post-revelations, Garland insisted that the Justice Department intends to hold anyone who was criminally responsible for the events surrounding January 6th for any attempt to interfere with the lawful transfer of power from one administration to another accountable. So obviously under that standard, Donald Trump will be included. But they say, asked whether Trump declaring his 2024 presidential run would have any any impact on the DOJ's approach to its probe. Garland repeated himself, saying, "We will hold accountable anyone who was criminally responsible for attempting to interfere with the legitimate, lawful transfer of power from one administration to the next." So again, he's kind of sticking to vague statements here. He's not necessarily saying, 100% we're going to prosecute Trump, but nonetheless, under that definition that he was just giving there, this would 100% apply to Trump. And just to give you a specific example here of what some of the people within his inner circle were saying about this scheme to appoint their own slate of electors in the various states like Arizona and Georgia and Wisconsin and Pennsylvania, etc., to basically just try to steal the election. So here from Mediaite, they say, stunning new emails show Trump team calling their own electoral vote scheme fake. So again, this is the words that they were using themselves. They say newly uncovered emails show former President Donald Trump's campaign team and their collaborators knew their attempts to dispute the 2020 election were legally fraught to the point of admitting that it was, quote, fake. This is according to a report from the New York Times. And they say the Times authenticated a series of emails from Trump campaign officials, lawyers, and people close to the ex-president, all of whom were involved with the plot to organize alternative electors and falsely declare Trump's 2020 victory. And these electors were meant to be given to former President Mike Pence and Trump's allies, a pretense to disrupt Congress certification of the election results, which wound up getting derailed anyways with the events of January 6th. And the emails show that Rudy Giuliani, Mark Meadows, and John Eastman all had correspondence with Trump campaign officials who worked with outside lawyers to assemble their list of alternative elector lists, even though they knew that it might not hold up to scrutiny. And one email shows that Jack Wilenchik, a Phoenix-based lawyer who helped with the plot in Arizona, contacted Trump campaign strategic advisor Boris Epstein, sorry if I'm completely butchering that name, with a suggestion of how to brand their electors to not be fake, as he himself called them. So they're literally trying to strategize, how can we make this seem like it's legitimate, even though we know 100% that it's bullshit and it's fake? I mean, they're literally just saying the quiet part out loud here, but they finish off here saying, a quote here, "We would just be sending in fake electoral votes to Pence so that someone in Congress can make an objection when they start counting the votes and start arguing that the fake votes should be counted," he said. And he later sent a follow-up email noting that alternative votes is probably better than using the term fake votes. So again, they know exactly what the fuck they were doing. There's no mystery about this. There's no two ways about this. Trump and his various lawyers, his legal team, his campaign officials, his chief of staff, Mark Meadows, they were all in on this shit. They knew exactly what was going to go down on January 6th. They wanted to use this as an opportunity to basically sick their mob on the Capitol, to put pressure on other lawmakers, to use these objections to justify putting forward a bullshit, fake slate of electors so that they could try to steal the election. And again, this is kind of important because, as we've been talking about on this channel, the independent state legislature theory that's going to be going in front of the Supreme Court in all likelihood in the next couple of months, if they decide on that in the way that we think they are going to, that would basically clear the legal pathway for right-wing, gerrymandered as fuck, usually along racial lines, state legislatures to send their own state of electors in presidential elections and, have intense sway over the federal elections at the congressional level as well. So if the Supreme Court rules that way how we think that they are right now, then that would, again, basically pave the legal pathway for this exact type of fake elector scheme to be done in 2024 in a legal way. So that in and of itself is pretty fucking terrifying. But now we get to the actual crimes that are being alleged here. So from Reuters, they lay out basically two different crimes that Trump could potentially be charged with, and I think that both of these are pretty rock solid. They start here saying obstructing an official proceeding. In a March 2nd court filing, the committee detailed Trump's efforts to persuade then Vice President Mike Pence to either reject slates of electors for Biden, who won the election, or delay a congressional count of the votes. And the president's efforts likely violated a federal law, making it illegal to corruptly obstruct any official proceeding or attempt to do so, said Andrew Carter, the California federal judge overseeing the case. So again, to corruptly obstruct any official proceeding or attempt to do so. How do you not come to the conclusion that Donald Trump is guilty in this circumstance? I mean, he definitely was doing this in a corrupt way, knowingly. Again, they knew that these were fake electors. They knew that this was a bullshit narrative that they were running with. So obviously, that is an instance of corruptly trying to obstruct justice or obstruct an official proceeding, in this case, the certification of the electoral votes. And they got a quote here saying, "The pressure on Pence alone is enough for prosecutors to prove that Trump obstructed the proceeding," said Barbara McQuaid, a law professor at the University of Michigan and former federal prosecutor. So they're saying even just his treatment of Mike Pence surrounding January 6th would be enough. I mean, again, we know that Trump was basically cheering along his supporters that were calling to hang Mike Pence. So again, seems like a pretty rock solid case there. But the second crime that he could potentially be charged with is conspiracy to defraud the United States. And they say the committee submitted the court filing as part of its effort to force Trump advisor John Eastman to hand over the documents, and the filing said that it was likely that Trump and others conspired to defraud the United States, which criminalizes any effort by two or more people to interfere with governmental functions by deceit, craft, or trickery. So again, I mean, yeah, they were using deceit. They knew that they were fucking lying about this, and they knew that they were obstructing this official proceeding on January 6th. So, you know, in terms of like the actual substance underlying the potential charges that Department of Justice official Merrick Garland could go with, it seems pretty rock solid to me. I don't see any other way around that. I think that a grand jury would in all likelihood find him guilty on this, but then it gets to another underlying question here, which is how far are Democrats actually willing to go? How far is Merrick Garland actually willing to go? Is he willing to confront a former president who he knows is going to, call it a fraudulent conspiracy against him and against his, odds in 2024? I mean, it's obviously going to be a massive, massive thing if they actually move forward with charging Donald Trump. I mean, that's not something that he's just going to go quietly and, accept that as something. I mean, he's going to be pushing back against it. He's going to raise, all hell in response to potential charges being filed against him. So it really comes down to, how many, how much courage or how much strength is Merrick Garland willing to put on display right now. And if his previous actions are any indication, then I don't have too much confidence in that. And again, we do live in the United States where, war criminals like George W. Bush, he was never prosecuted. Obama said we need to keep looking forward. You can pull up plenty of other examples of U.S. presidents just rampantly getting away with crimes. So, I wouldn't be that surprised if he does wriggle his way out of this one. But nonetheless, it is still a pretty big piece of news here that the DOJ is in fact moving forward with a criminal probe of Donald Trump himself.